we have two popular green methodologies. One is the cradle to cradle protocol, which we have discussed earlier, and the second one is the emissions trading. The emissions trading is the one that we are going to look at now. In the emissions trading, what you are doing is, this is you, which is producing the gases, and you want to claim this, convert this into this, that is, as though, then what you do is you offset credits. So let us see how this is done. So the basic principle of emission trading is, suppose there are two firms, X and Y, that are polluting the atmosphere, and the country wants to decrease the overall level of pollution and mandates both firms reduce the amount of pollutants they emit into the atmosphere. So there is a regulation that says you should reduce both for X and Y, and the cost of emission reduction might differ markedly for these two firms. So firm X might be able to reduce its emissions at a much lower cost than Y, because it could be X and Y are in different industries, and it is possible that to reduce the percentage of emissions for X, it may cost much less than for Y. So the difference in the cost of emissions reduction creates a market opportunity. Now there are two, both of them are regulated to reduce this one, but to reduce the carbon emissions of one, it costs much less than the other. So what you could do is, the firms that could reduce the same amount of total emissions at a lower cost, if firm X reduces more than what it has to and sells the extra reduction to firm Y at a cost lower than the cost of emissions of reduction to Y. In other words, it's a win-win. If you can sell, supposing X, since it is cheaper, instead of if it is asked to reduce by 30%, it reduces by 40%, because it is cheaper to reduce it, and it is beating its own goal by the government regulations, and it has 10% extra credits, so that it can sell to Y, and Y, instead of reducing it by 30%, it can reduce by 20%. So it should be, the cost X charges to Y should be less than what Y has to pay to the regulator. So basically, it's a simple principle of trading, where one company, where it is cheaper to reduce the emissions, does more than what it is required and then sells the saved credits to this. Firm X will gain because of the difference between the cost of emission reduction of firm X and firm Y, and firm Y will gain for the same reason. So, well, it's obvious that for X, whatever it gets from Y should be more than what it spends in reducing the emissions, and of course for Y, it should buy cheaper from X than it has to pay to the regulator. So it has to be a win-win situation for both. So there is what is called cap and trade. That is, regulatory bodies establish a cap called emission cap on the level of emissions permitted in a jurisdiction. The participants in the program receive credits distributed, sometimes given, sometimes purchased through auction by regulatory authorities, which correspond to the amount of pollution defined as the number of tons of pollutants in a year, and they are allowed to emit within a year. So this is basically a regulation, this one. If they exceed the cap, they have to pay a tax. They have to buy credits from other participants. So hence total pollution is limited to the total amount of cap, and trading allows for an efficient allocation of pollution, as those participants who can reduce emissions in a cost effective way will do so and benefit from trading with those who cannot. So basically, it's this cap and trade is the same thing as we discussed between X and Y. Here there is a government limit and you have to follow that limit, and you can buy the credits from others who could do it cheaper. So, if you are looking at an example, there are two power plants, and power plant A emits 100 tons of CO2 and plant B emits 200 tons of CO2. So, the total emissions are 300 tons. So, the CO2 emission is 300 tons. Now, the government steps in and says it puts a cap of 210 tons of CO2 total, 30% reduction. Both plants have to decrease the pollution by 30%. A can emit only 70 tons of CO2 and B 140 tons of CO2. And the cost of reduction of 1 ton of CO2 for plant A is $20 for the first 30 units and $50 for plant B for the first 60 units. So, if the plants A and B reduce pollution separately, the total cost of emissions for 210 tons will be, because A has to reduce by 30 and it costs $20 per ton, that is 20 into 30, whereas for B it has to reduce by 60 and it costs $50 for the plant B. So, this is $3,600. So, if they do it independently. Now, you can always find that here that the A it has to reduce by 30 units and it costs only $20, whereas for B it has to reduce by 60 units and it costs $50 for the plant. So, you can see it costs more for B to reduce this one. So, there is an opportunity here for A to reduce more and sell it to B. That is what it does. So, plant A is able to reduce emissions at a lower cost than plant B, and if it can reduce more than 30 units, it can sell permits to the plant B. I mean, this is allowed and people have made a lot of money in the cap and trade scheme. There are companies who basically advise you on this. It is like stock market trading. And if plant A reduces 60 tons of CO2 at 20, the plant B could reduce 30 tons at 50, implying that the total cost of production of 210 will be 20 into 60 plus 30 into 50, that is 2,700, which is less than 3,600. I think this is a simple mathematics which shows that instead of 3,600 each paying independently, if the both of them combine and then they pay 2,700. Then A can sell the extra 30 at a cost between 20 and 50, because B will not buy if it is 50, because he can reduce it himself. But on the other hand, A cannot sell below 20, so it has to be between 20 and 50 and get a profit for the extra emissions. B also benefits that the average cost of reducing emissions is lower than 50. So, A and B could be in different continents. So, basically about the cap and trade, the idea is the global universe is the same. So, you can produce emissions in one part of the world and reduce the emissions and do the cap trade in another part of the world. So, this is the kind of the cap and trade that is being done, and it is very popular trading scheme. And so, there what are called offsets. A carbon offset is another type of commodity that represents the reduction of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent by qualifying carbon reduction project. So, the carbon offset may or may not represent the actual reduction of CO2 emissions. Examples of offset include renewable power generation, energy efficiency projects and forestry and industry waste remediation. So, see, you can reduce the one with the earlier cap and trade is if you are generating emissions, then you have to reduce the emissions someplace. That's one way of doing it. But the other offset is you can do some other energy efficient project like solar somewhere else in the world or windmill and get the credit for that in terms of the renewable power generation. So, in other words, you can have a cement plant, you pollute the atmosphere in one part of the world and have a solar plant in somewhere else, and you can offset the credits. So, there are governing bodies that attempt to ensure offsets are real and accounted properly, because you are trying to match apples and tomatoes here. In other words, your carbon from a cement plant you want to offset to a solar power in the other. So, some body in between, a regulatory body, has to decide what it means in terms of offset. So, a renewable energy certificate can be converted into carbon offsets by proving the renewable energy generated actually offsetting an equivalent amount of carbon based electricity production. So, if you are doing, say, renewable energy like solar or a windmill, and if you are generating so many megawatts of electricity, you have to see to generate same amount of electricity either through coal or some other fuel, then you have to see how much of carbon you will spend, and that is going to be your offsets. So, there has to be some standardization and conversion of these offsets and so on. This seems to be the one that is going on now. So, basically the emission trading, it is a trading, basically it is half scientific and half marketing and trading into the market. So, basically you can go to a stock exchange and trade your carbon offsets, and that business goes on. So, what we have seen so far is that there are two ways of in which you can design your green supply chains. One way is to look at the cradle to cradle protocol. You are doing all the hard work with your suppliers, with your manufacturing plants, redesign your products so that they are recyclable, and you are reducing your carbon generation in your manufacturing processes. You are using your distribution or your transportation, which is with minimal carbon footprint, and your distribution centers are all either solar or minimal carbon footprint. And so, you take several of these steps, and that is the first step of cradle to cradle protocol, which is basically a very scientific way of reducing the real carbon emitted into the atmosphere. The other one, which is a marketing jargon which came in the Kyoto Protocol, is that you can trade your carbon. Now, when you are trading your carbon, is it real carbon? If you are generating carbon and you trade off with the same body in the same vertical industry, then probably you are saving the atmosphere. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it, instead of, there are offsets. Instead of the carbon you generate, you produce some other factory which actually saves the carbons, and you try to offset it. So, there are various kinds of schemes that are possible, and when you are designing your supply chain, it is important that you consider both schemes. Since carbon trading is legal and it is allowed, you need not have to spend all your time on cradle-to-cradle protocol, redesigning your products, redesigning your processes, and so on. You can see a part of the time, part of your effort into where you can trade. Maybe if you have factory somewhere and then you want to start a solar factory there with, if it is in a hot climate and if it has 12 hours of sun every day, then maybe it may make sense for you to start a factory there and then use those credits there. So, the supply chain design is basically, if you are designing network design, you have to take both these into account. That's what our definition of the green supply chain is. So, it is a strategically designed inter-organizational network. GSCN is Global Green Supply Chain Network, is a strategically designed inter-organizational network delivering green products designed and produced environmentally friendly green procurement manufacturing strategic processes. So, you have designed a green product, you are producing that product, your procurement, your manufacturing, your distribution, and other thing is you have taken care that you are minimizing your carbon credits and deliver low carbon footprint products or solutions to your customers. So, in other words, you produce this and you deliver it to your customers and reduce resource usage and pollutants following the cradle protocol and encouraging re-innovations. What are the re-innovations? Reuse, repair, recycle. And there are the forward SCN, the supply chain network, and the backward SCN network, reverse logistics are all in place. The backward supply chain network is the one from the consumer. Once he dumps the product, as disposes the product, you have to recycle, reuse and all that. That's the backward supply chain. And there is the reverse logistics like B2B, B2C logistics, which takes the products in the forward direction. You have the reverse logistics, which basically takes the products in the reverse direction once it is disposed of. And reverse logistics is basically very difficult thing because the uncertainty of the disposal and so on. And minimal carbon footprint using efficient trading mechanisms. So, I think once you have the supply chain, all your operations, you should look at not only the design of the green supply chain, which is with the minimal CO2 generation, you should also look at the carbon footprint using efficient trading mechanisms. In other words, can you use efficient trading mechanisms where you can save money? In other words, if you are having very efficient processes, so can you trade some of the carbon that you have saved? Or will it make economic sense for you to trade, buy the carbon credits from somewhere else instead of going through your processes, which are basically not carbon efficient? So, there is always the balance of reducing the carbon, as we see in the numerical examples. You are reducing the carbon emissions, may be very expensive, and you can trade them very easily. So, it all depends. So, basically the design of your network, you have to consider all the factors, both the cradle to cradle protocol as well as the efficient trading mechanisms. See, the green supply chain functioning is coordinated and executed so that its outcomes conforms to the objectives of the triple bottom line: sustainability, economic development, and social well-being. So, basically your objectives of the global supply chain are the same. It is the triple bottom line, sustainability, you want to produce products and you want to save the future for future generations and all that. But the important thing is you follow 2 points. First one is the cradle to cradle protocol in your design, manufacturing, distribution, etc. and also in the reverse logistics. The second one is the trading. So you can use both. So having seen this, before we get into the design of the green supply chains, this one, I thought it is better we look at what is the industry practice that is happening in the industry today. In other words, what is the state of the industry? We are talking of the green practices. This one. So basically, let's look at what are the initiatives in practice. What's happening in the industry? So low carbon innovations are not just new products and technologies. They also include new services and processes such as the information and communication technologies, chemicals and materials, agriculture, law, accounting and consulting. In other words, if you want to use this, in other words, supposing you are somebody, you want to use the green supply chain innovations, what are the kinds of things that you could do in this? The Dutch flower industry, for example, cultivates flowers in rock wool and transports them in trays, reducing shipping time and cost. So what they do is they basically in the flowers in rock wool, in the stuff of the sand, in the stuff of the soil, and it is all in parts, and parts are exported by themselves. So you need not have to take the part out, the flower out, and then see that it doesn't get tarnished or spoiled and so on. But what you do is to basically put it in rock wool and transport by as the parts themselves, so that you save a lot of time and shipping costs. That's basically one of the innovations that they do, and they are saving a lot of carbon in this because they don't use pesticides, they don't use fertilizers and so on, and they are using the rock well. And Best Buy partnered with GE to bring new home energy management systems, smart appliances and renewable energy products to market them more rapidly. See, Best Buy, GE has brought out this and the home energy management systems and so on. So they are bringing out the products for the electrical products. And Morrison and Foerster LLP began law practice focused on clean technology, offering corporate and litigation services along the technical expertise in intellectual property, energy, environmental laws. Billings grew from 6 million in 2006 to 100 million in 2011. Now, I mean, you can see there are a lot of people who want to make an opportunity of this. One thing is, like in trading, we are seeing that you can trade, you can basically convert the offsets and so on. So what if there is a legal issue? Who is going to defend you in the court? So somebody has started this legal practice. It's focused on clean technology, offering corporate litigation services. So somebody can say it is a green product and it is not a green product. Supposing your supplier says he will supply you a green product, he doesn't supply. What do? You have to go to the law. So is there a law firm which is an expert on this? It's no. So this is happening like in the IT industry today. For example, you have a lot of social media that are coming up like Facebook, like LinkedIn and so on. So I mean, when you are in LinkedIn, when you are talking with your friends, you think it is confidential, or you think it is not public. So, but it is public. So basically, there are litigations that come in, and people have to be careful about this. So particularly since green is not so very well defined right now, and it is a new thing. It is possible somebody says it is green. Your definition of green is different from my definition of green. We are going to look at this is an important thing, because supposing my definition of green is less carbon and your definition of green is less use of less energy. So there could be some differences. So there is a law of practice that was focused on this. And automakers adopting new start-stop battery mechanisms from Johnson Controls that turn off vehicles' engines off rather than idle when the vehicles stop. So there are several of these things which are coming up with saying that the vehicle stops instead of this one, and it immediately starts once you release the brake. So there are several green supply chain innovations which are coming up. So it need not be, I mean the reason why I am showing this is the reason it need not have to be always a manufacturing production process, a supply chain and so on. But there is a supply chain behind each of these products to create green supply chains or a service like a law and so on. But these products are created so that ultimately they save the carbon credits. So green delivery is video conferencing system. For example, it avoids substitutes for many forms of business travel. HP and its customers saved 666,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gas emissions in 2 years, and HP reduced its employee business travel by 43%. So each employee has a carbon credit count that depends on his basically the office, the energy he consumes in the office, the mode of transportation that he uses from house to office and return, and also his office travel. So basically by using a video conferencing system, companies are saving. SAP introduced Carbon Impact on Demand 5.0 carbon management software, leading to 1.3 billion enterprise carbon accounting marketplace. So if you are a company, how do you find out what is your carbon? This one. So SAP has introduced a software, and this can be used, and it is basically a very good move. And HP works with corporate customers to design, implement and manage an imaging and printing infrastructure. For one customer with 10,000 employees, HP reduced printing energy consumption by 66%. Fortune 500 companies could avoid 2.3 million metric tons of carbon dioxide annually by reducing printing. So if you are using a printer and if you want to reduce the printing, then you could do that by avoiding printing. Use email and other methods. For low carbon innovations to take root, companies must develop the necessary network for external partners that enable them. See, there is a co-evolution that goes on for any of these kind of innovations. We have seen earlier that the innovation in global supply chains is by outsourcing and then low cost outsourcing to basically regulatory restrictions removal to delivery mechanisms and all that. Similarly, if you want the green delivery to take green products to take root, companies must develop the necessary networks of external partners to enable them. It's not enough if you just generate the product, and you should find out how to co-evolve from this. So basically the next this one is, we have seen what are some of the innovations and so on. Let us look at a company where, like a cement company, which is Cemex, and and its sustainability innovations on this. So, the reason for looking at Cemex is that it is a cement company which is a highly carbon intensive company, and it basically emits a lot of gases into the atmosphere. And what are the kinds of initiatives that they are doing? One thing is to look at the innovations like SAP's software for carbon footprint, and the innovations of the other companies. But another thing is, how is the actual reduction taking place by these companies like Cemex. So, let us look at that. So, Cemex is, what are the sustainability innovations in this? You know, Cemex is a cement company, and cement industry is unconventional and low tech. Well, it is used in building construction. It has no high technology and stands out as an emerging economy chain. In other words, it's from Mexico, and it is the third largest. It has become in no time. And it's the best practice model since late 1980s. It has grown rapidly from a local cement producer in Mexico to the third largest cement company in the world. So, basically, it has made tremendous amount of progress. The success of the company is because it has built superior information and logistics capabilities, excellent business models, and an efficient supply chain with risk green operating practices. So, basically, if you look at the supply chain here in this, what is there? You know, you start with clinker and then try to heat it up and then make cement, and you know, this is the model, and it is high temperature, and it emanates a lot of gases into this. How are you going to reduce this, or how do you make up? What are the sustainability practices? Because there are two issues here. One is the price of cement is low. It's a commodity product. And if you say a cement company, it is not a high profile company, this one. And the second thing is the government regulates the price at a low level because the infrastructure, the house building and everything needs cement, and they cannot increase the prices as they like. The prices are regulated. And second thing is the communities are basically as state if the cement plant is in their neighborhood, because they know it emanates sulfur dioxide and all the poisonous gases, and also it spoils the atmosphere, and it ultimately affects the health of the residents. So, because of all these reasons that Cemex has, what are the kinds of initiatives that such a company should do, so that it A, satisfies the government, B, it satisfies the communities, and C, it actually produces at the price that is in the market, because cement is such a commodity product. You cannot increase the price because it is green cement. So, what are Cemex offerings? I mean, Cemex basically has grown into global building solutions. What Cemex does is, instead of cement, it says it will offer building solutions that provide products at consistently high quality and reliable service to customers and communities in Americas, Europe, Africa, and Middle East and Asia. So, first thing it did was, instead of just cement, it offers all the building solutions. All the building materials like steel and others. It may not manufacture the steel. It manufactures cement, but it procures the other materials like gravel and the steel and others, and orchestrates so that it basically supplies to various distributors. And the operation network operations network produces, distributes and markets cement, ready mix, concrete, aggregates and related building materials to customers in over 50 countries. So basically it's a company that is doing very well. It markets cement, ready mix, concrete, aggregates and other building materials globally. So what is the carbon footprint of cement? The production of cement is carbon intensive, requiring high temperature sintering of limestone, clay, iron oxide to create clinker, the basic material for cement. So it takes limestone, clay and iron oxide to create clinker, and from clinker you get the cement. And basically it is a high temperature sintering process. And the heating process takes place in large rotary kilns that reach temperatures of 1400 degrees centigrade to catalyze proper chemical reactions. So you can see the complexity here. You have to generate these temperatures, so you need fuel to get up to these temperatures. So whatever the fuel is, basically if you are using whatever fuel you are using, and to get it to 1400 you generate lot of gases. And also during the chemical reactions of making this particular product from limestone to cement or clay or clinker, you are going to produce lot of poisonous gases, and of course there are remnants which pollute. So both the fuel requirements of the kilns and the reaction processes result in significant releases of CO2 into the atmosphere. So you require fuel for the kiln as well as the reaction processes. Both of them will generate lot of CO2 into the atmosphere. And so it's a complicated thing how to reduce. The cement industry as a whole represents 5% of all carbon emissions associated with human activity, an issue that has spurred widespread effort to reduce the carbon footprint of cement production. So 5% of the total carbon emissions are from cement. So that's where it becomes very important to talk about this. Although you see, the point here is it's a commodity industry. And in the commodity industry, you don't spend a lot of money because you cannot increase the price. You cannot say it is green cement and charge more. So that is where the importance of doing things well in this one. So what are the sustainability initiatives? I mean, I have given you the background of the industry. And what are the initiatives that CEMEX has taken? CEMEX has three main sustainability objectives. It is enhance its value creation. CEMEX aims to deliver the innovative high performance products, services and solutions to the resource constrained society. Requires for building a low carbon economy. That is the value creation. Manage its carbon footprint. It strives to minimize the ecological impacts of the operations of the communities and engage stakeholders. As I said before, it's not enough if you are green. Your stakeholders, your society, your people should be green. You know, for example, if you can make your clinker which is green, but then what about the transportation to the customers? Then it has to be green. So basically, if you it's with highly committed and empowered employees, CEMEX closely collaborates with a variety of institutions with complementary core competencies to strengthen the local communities. So what is the carbon strategy of CEMEX? The carbon strategy is designed a carbon strategy to help reduce the environmental impacts of its operations while creating economic value and driving the construction industry's participation in the development of low carbon economy. So, there are two things it is doing. One is it is trying to reduce the value of its operations, the problems with its operations, and also it is trying to help construction industry as a whole, where Cemex belongs. It is trying to create value, and it is driving the construction industry's participation in the development of low carbon economy. The key components of strategy are reduce ecological footprint of our production process, replacing traditional fossil fuels with low emission alternatives. Reducing the clinker content in cement, because evidently that gives you a lot of less carbon, this one. Increasing our use of renewable electricity and other energy efficiency of operations, because it requires a lot of electric power and energy that use renewable energy in this. Aligning operations and initiatives with international standards, regulations and market-based mechanisms for emissions reductions. So, whatever people are doing, whatever are the standards, ISO 14000, whatever, they are following this kind of standards. So, let us look at what they are trying to do here. So, the carbon footprint tool, they have developed a carbon footprint tool. A key pillar of our CO2 reduction efforts is our carbon footprint tool that helps us quantify the direct and indirect account of CO2 emitted during the production process of cement, concrete and aggregates up until the product leaves our facilities. So, well, the popular belief is unless you can measure, you cannot control. What you cannot measure, you cannot control. So, here you have to have a carbon footprint tool for your kiln and all the operations till from end to end. In other words, you get the various raw materials, you fire them up in your rotary kiln and finally get the clinker and make them into cement and then concrete and aggregates and slabs and all that. So, when it leaves your factory up to that, what is the carbon footprint? And now then look at how to reduce this. So, there is this one that Cemex follows is waste to value. Cemex carbon strategy is to reduce the environmental impacts of its operations as well as to drive the development of low carbon economy from waste to value. How does it do? Cemex uses residues or byproducts from industrial, domestic, agriculture and forestry processes to fuel cement facilities. So, it uses this whatever garbage, the municipal garbage as well as the agriculture and domestic and forestry processes, everything to fire up its plants. For example, some of the materials that are the waste include used tires, spent solvents, waste oils, processed municipal solid waste, household waste, agriculture wastages such as rice, peanut shells and coffee husks and animal meal, sewage sludge and so on. So, basically all these things are being used. These are the outputs of various processes in the households, in the cities and so on. It is using it as a fuel. So, this is following the biological principle of the waste of one animal is the food for another animal. It is the same thing that the waste of municipal waste is used as a fuel for Cemex. So, the process reduces reliance on fossil fuels. and CEMEX uses alternative fuels increased. The alternate use 27.1% of the total fuel mix. It has increased by 7%. It was 20% in 2010 and 2012 it is 27%. So basically it is helping the communities to reduce the waste instead of in landfill. It goes into the fuel and basically that converts, and it is saving energy there. So mimics bioecosystems where waste of one entity delivers value for another. So developing alternate energy sources. I mean CEMEX, I have taken this example because if you are talking of green supply chain, there are varieties of ways in which you can reduce your carbon footprint. There are various alternatives you can create, and I think CEMEX has done wonderfully well by using a biological waste into their kilns and also developing alternate energy sources. For example, CEMEX owns a wind farm in Mexico with a capacity to provide 25% of energy needed to run Mexican operations, and in 2011 allowed CEMEX to avoid 169 tons of CO2 emissions. So this is basically kind of carbon trading, but instead of trading and then setting up the plant somewhere in some other country, in some other continent, what CEMEX does is whatever power it is needed, it generates through green alternatives like windmills. And CEMEX reduces carbon footprint by using efficient process technologies and changing the way it sources electricity. In 2011, CEMEX Philippines launched a collaborative project with Sinoma Energy Conversion Limited to devise a system for capturing waste heat from the kiln to produce clean alternative electricity. So now cement not only uses this one, it has 1400 degrees centigrade, it operates. So there is a lot of waste heat that is coming out from the rotary kiln. Can you use that heat to fire up your boilers, to heat the boilers and then generate electricity, and that's what they have been trying. So every means they are trying to generate electricity or use the waste as a fuel and so on. So if you look at the drivers of the green initiatives, so that I think that's where we have looked at several examples so far. What are the initiatives that people are taking to drive up the green this one? Before we go into the design in the next class, I have presented to you various innovations that people are following, if you want to call them innovations or practices, so that they can save the energy. One is physical change in the environment is the basis for policy discussions. In other words, for any green environment, there is a lot of climate change, there is a lot of pollution and so on, and health of people getting spoiled, and that's a physical change in the environment. And that creates regulation. So regulation in turn can affect development and availability of technology. In other words, once there is a regulation to reduce this, you devise new technologies. Regulation and availability of technology affect national and global markets, because once there is a regulation for green products, you try to regulate this. And consumer habits and thus the demand for greener products can affect the way companies do business and encourage them to adopt new technologies that allow them to meet new consumer needs. So basically this, whatever your examples you have seen, they are basically coming from either social pressures or the government regulatory pressures or increases in the technology like solar energy. So you are using the intelligence and the technology, and you are basically trying to counter the gas, this one, by coal-fired electricity generation and so on. So you can see this is a coevolution that happens from whatever happens through the green, this one. So green versus customer value. No new carbon innovation will survive the marketplace if it fails to maximize the customer value along multiple dimensions. I think this is one thing that all the green people should remember, that you can produce a product, and unless it delivers value to the customer, whether it is green or not, nobody is going to buy. In other words, in addition to being green, if it reduces less electricity, if it produces less water, some other benefit the customers won't buy. So reduction in carbon emission alone will not make low carbon innovation successful in the marketplace. The innovations must also bring bottom line value in terms of total cost reduction, enhanced performance, or competitive edge. So the customer will ask, all right, you are following your regulations and you are producing green products. Now what is in it for me? Am I to use the same thing? Am I using less electricity, less water, or am I getting the product at a cheaper cost? What is it? Just because it is a green and you are meeting the environmental regulations of the government, I cannot pay more price. That's what the customer will say. So what we are doing, what we have done so far is, in these 2 lectures, is to look at the ecosystem of the green, this one. What is happening in the world and what is it? Carbon trading and protocols and so on. So before we go into this one, green supply chains is a very important subject that affects all the 3 sectors of the economy, and also the livelihood, health and well-being of the humans and other species. Not given attention as yet. I mean, the green supply chains are not given as much attention as the design. So green supply chain design is an important topic that deserves attention. It's across the board, not only if you are an industry vertical, it can food, agriculture, water services and so on. The mapping the entire green supply chain and see what are the alternatives that are available for its operation, for its use, generating the products and so on is an important this one. What we will do in the next class is how to design a green supply chain. That we'll do.